Everything that's important about life as a human being, you learn in context of relationships.
We need somebody that we can trust, that we can hold on to, who walks with us hand in hand through the whole deal.
Brain research gives us the new lens in which to begin to look at children's behavior and the meaning of their behavior in a completely different way.
They'd found that if you took a little rat pup and you held it, a human being held it for a very brief period of time, which was stressful to the rat, and put the rat pup back in the litter with the mother, let the rat grow up, and then looked at its brain, it was different than animals that hadn't been handled.
Early in life, many of these connections in the brain, what are called synapses, develop based on genetics, but also based on how experiences occur. And then throughout childhood, the changes in the brain that occur in an interaction between genes and the experiences kids have.
The research on the brain has for the first time given us biological, physical proof that interactional processes that don't go well, for example, impact the brain profoundly.
If the brainstem, for whatever reason, has some insult during development, it could be alcohol exposure in utero, it could be cigarette smoking, it could be prenatal exposure to drug, or it could be significant distress in the caregiver. For whatever reason, if the brainstem is poorly organized and overreactive and dysynchronous, the baby's born, and very often they will have what we call a state regulation problem. They are hard to soothe, you can't quiet them down very well, it's hard to engage them, and it makes the caregivers feel overwhelmed. They can't calm the child down very well, the child stays all stirred up, and instead of having this smooth, synchronous interaction, you have kind of this bad fit.
When a pregnant mother is under constant stress, she might just be stressed at the office, but her brain and her body and her developing baby's brain don't know the difference between that and that there are predators in the environment. So we're seeing babies being born that are hyperreactive. Why? Mom's under stress during her whole pregnancy, either through work or through being unsupported by her community, by her partner, by her family, whatever. So we have this baby born that's already hyperreactive.
The attachment bond between the parent and the child is really the carrier of all development, and the regulation that a mother provides, the soothing that the mother gives to the baby, the calming of the baby's nervous system. If she can do that well, the baby's nervous system will learn how to regulate itself. If she cannot do that, if she herself is all unregulated, if she is sick, if she's in marital discord, if she's depressed, she cannot attend adequately to her baby to where the baby feels like there's somebody there watching out for him or her, then the baby goes into these heightened states of hyperarousal and dysregulation, and the body, the template of that, is being set.
Attachment relationships where the parent is sensitive to the child's inner state lead the child to have a brain that becomes very integrated and a mind that is very coherent.
What our bodies want for best development is relationship. Every neuron in our brain develops most optimally through a loving relationship.
The most important pivotal experience in a child's life is that a caregiver and a child have a falling in love experience. And that experience of joy is invigorating to the body on all fronts, and is essential to being able to develop the capacity to care, to be able to develop the capacity to love, and to have empathy for other human beings, and to be able to have moral conscience.
Relationships are the absolute heart of humanity, and we are neurobiologically designed to be in relationships. We are neurobiologically designed to be able to read and respond to other people, and we're neurobiologically designed to reach out and seek relationships with other people. And when we have these opportunities to form healthy relationships with family, with neighbors, with coworkers, with members of the community, we're healthy. And when we don't have those opportunities, we literally are physiologically at risk.
infants are not soothed, repeatedly not soothed by their parents when they're in distress, that impacts one of the chemical systems in the brain, what's called the cortisol system. And cortisol is a natural neurohormone for calming arousal down, calming distress down. And if an infant's not soothed, then they increase their cortisol levels to try to make up for the lack of soothing by the parents, self-soothing. And then because high levels of cortisol are dangerous to brain tissue, it resets the thermostat. And that as a result of that, through the rest of their life until recently, we thought it was permanent, the thermostat is set so that they have less cortisol and less capability of handling distress. So they're more prone to getting upset, more prone to staying upset once they get upset.
If parents are not providing sensitive caregiving, where they're not tuned into the internal state of the child, then you have various kinds of difficulties that can arise.
Developmental trauma, including neglect, has as high an impact over the lifespan as a single incident trauma.
Developmental trauma or ambient trauma is trauma that's just everyday life. It's in the neighborhood, it's in the household.
It is at times very confusing to the adult world the way children respond to traumatic events, and it's very easy for adults to dismiss the profound impact that a traumatic event can have on a child, because very often they will do most things pretty well.
There's a strong sense that children are there to manipulate us and to be willfully disobedient. And instead of really understanding the child from the child's point of view, I think we've imposed something from the outside, almost adult characteristics onto children.
One of the single most important understandings that parents can have is to realize that trauma creates fear in children, and anger has an underlying element of fear. And so instead of focusing just on the anger, we can address the fear in children and calm and soothe the fear that will make the anger go away, rather than just focusing on the anger.
Children who have experienced some type of trauma often have symptoms of ADD.
These difficult behaviors are really stress responses, and it's up to us to figure out what is causing these stress responses. And there's several different pathways that they can show us that they're distressed. The first stress response is a hypersensitive, hyperreactive stress response. And these infants cry a lot, are inconsolable. When they become toddlers, they may go into rapid temper tantrums and be very volatile. A second stress response are infants who are hypervigilant. These infants will have very wide eyes and will be very vigilantly looking, and you can see that there's an anxiety in their muscle tone and in how they carry themselves, and that they're scanning the environment. A toddler may be overly clingy or overly withdrawn. A third stress response would be very shut down and tuned out. These children, again, may be misunderstood as a good, easy baby.
There are equal number of children who are too good, too quiet, withdrawn, who demonstrate the cool side, the shutdown, the frozen side of trauma. Most teachers, most educators at this point still don't recognize those kids, and they often become as problematic or more problematic than the more obviously upset kid.
You can't always tell when a child has been traumatized. Very often they may be going through the day interacting normally with their peers. They'll be playing games, they might be laughing, and you may not have any idea that that child the week before lost their parent in a violent event. However, if you follow that child long enough, what you'll find is that under the smallest challenge, they'll unravel and they'll unwind. And it's not always predictable. They may handle one situation very well and then completely collapse in something that seems pretty minor.
when an attachment figure is the source of terror, the child's brain has two processes going on at once. One is the inborn attachment system, which says, I'm in a state of alarm, I need to go to my attachment figure for soothing. But if that attachment figure is the source of the distress, and I don't just mean being upset and you don't get ice cream before dinner, I mean terror, then what happens is the child will then try another track in the child's brain will state, do not go toward that figure, that's the cause of your distress.
Parents are unaware of how that they can traumatize their infants or their toddlers, and then they're unaware of what their children's signals mean.
People who are traumatized are stressed, and the stress doesn't go away. The symptoms don't go away. They persist in one way or another, either as a psychological problem or as a learning problem or as perhaps a physical problem in the body. For years and years and years, they never disappear. They come, they go, but they're always back again. That's trauma. That's stress at the level of trauma.
98% of parents who have children who have been traumatized have also been traumatized themselves. So healing the parent's trauma first allows them to create an environment for the healing of their child's trauma.
If you really want to understand how a child is functioning in the present, you need to understand their personal history. Because the brain, more than anything, is an historical organ. It stores experiences. So if you understand the personal experiences of the child, you will understand a lot about how different systems in the brain are organized.
We look at the whole person, we look at their whole history, and we look at their development. We look at what's happened in their body, in their life, in their social structure. We look at all the aspects of their life, and then we determine where to go from there.
One of the most important factors in a good developmental history is getting some understanding and some insights about the child-rearing beliefs and practices of their caregiver, which you can usually get by asking them about their family and the way they were raised.
We have to work with parents who can feel good enough about themselves so that they can allow their children to feel good enough, and there won't be the kind of abuse.
It is essential to treat the entire family when healing trauma in children. Without healing the trauma of the family and creating awareness for the family, you can't heal the child.
It's a parent's own self-understanding that is so crucial for the quality of the relationship with the child. Trauma is like a dog bite, in the sense of when a dog bites you on the fingers, your natural instinct is to pull your fingers away, and unfortunately that will create more damage to your skin. What really you need to do if a dog bites you in the hand is thrust your hand into the dog's mouth, which makes the dog gag. Now, I know it's very graphic, but it's the same thing with trauma. Parents need to know it's important to go into the trauma, into the mouth of the trauma with your mind and with the relationship, so that it doesn't dig its teeth in and yank the flesh of your soul away.
First of all, we have to get our children and our infants back into a condition of safety. That may be that they need contact with a safe relationship, that maybe they have had a disruption and they need to maybe not go to school that day and spend time with mommy, and maybe mommy needs to not go to work and just spend time with her child. So they need to get to regain a sense of safety if in fact that has been their baseline. One of the ways we help infants and children regain a sense of safety is to start to become what I call a sensory detective. We need to start becoming really aware of what sensations are reminders of that traumatic event, and they could be sounds, they could be tastes, they could be something visual, they could be a particular movement, a particular touch. And we're going to reintroduce a sensation that has been very traumatic or that triggers a traumatic memory. We want to be very clear that we give the right dose that the child or infant can handle. So it's going to have to be very small increments of helping them be able to experience that sensation, recover from that sensation, get back into safety, and then slowly go back and forth between a sense of fear, feeling out of control, and then being able to get back in control and safety. And the fourth is to increase the child's surround of sensory comfort so that beyond the caregiver, there can be many arenas of sensory comfort that the child or infant can surround themselves with, whether it's music or a particular touch of a blanket or a particular toy that they hold that they feel safe with.
The next phase, though, is to tell the story of the experience, to make a narrative of it, so that other parts of the mind, and the brain, if you will, the left hemisphere, can join in the process of making sense. It also involves the verbal aspect of the creation of a story from before the trauma happened, what happened at the time the trauma began, what were the elements of the experience of the trauma, what was the most frightening part, how did the trauma resolve,
what surprised them, what they didn't expect, what their body felt like, what it felt like in their body, what it felt like in their emotions. Can they tell us what those emotions are? Can they get pictures and put together the story?
What the narrative experience tells us is that what's shareable is bearable. And so when a person can bring it out and share it with another, then it becomes more bearable than keeping it to yourself.
A lot of the trauma that has happened to children happened before they were verbal. There's no way we're going to work with that verbally. We have to get into their senses.
With infants and young children who are preverbal, there is still a way that parents can communicate to the child that they are understanding their child's distress and the importance of that. And they can communicate the story and the narrative of understanding, I understand what happened to you, even though the child may not completely understand the language of it. They will understand the tone of voice, they will understand the rhythm and the rate in which that's communicated.
Half of our brains, our right half, can only speak the language of the nonverbal. And the nonverbal includes eye contact, then there's facial expression, tone of voice, posture, gestures, and timing and intensity of response. Those nonverbal signals can be taught to parents, and they can use them to understand what's going on with other people, and especially what's going on with young children.
Early childhood trauma changes the biology of the brain. Well, early childhood support also changes the biology of the brain.
What studies of resilience show that even when children have insecure attachments in the home, if they've had at least one secure attachment with a daycare provider, a preschool teacher, or another adult in their lives, then that makes a huge difference for them having the seed of resilience. They may still have difficulties, but because they've had that one secure relationship, that relationship where they felt that another individual, another adult knows them and feels what's going on inside of them, those kids have the potential to do very well in the future.
We can see imaging today of before and after trauma and see what happens in the brain, and we can also see repair that happens in the brain when our interventions have been successful.
What makes children get better following a trauma is connection to other human beings who are present, who are patient, who are kind, who are sensitive, and they don't need to be necessarily psychologically insightful. They don't need to know anything about trauma. All they need to know is that they're right there with this child, they're trying to be comforting, they're trying to be supportive, they're trying to encourage. Those kinds of interactions end up being much more therapeutic and healing than many of the other things that we try to do with kids.
Teachers can look more at their children, be more emotionally present for children, touch them, work on their own nervous system and their own regulation. If they're angry and they're out of control in terms of what's going on inside of themselves, the message that they're going to convey to the child is, I'm angry and I don't like you.
If you're an adult and there are children in your life, whether you're in law enforcement, a teacher, a parent, a foster parent, whatever you are, and you know that a child has been exposed to something that's potentially traumatic, the first thing that you should be aware of is that not all traumatic events lead to disastrous mental health outcomes. In fact, the vast majority of children that are traumatized actually do pretty well, but they do need your attention, they do need your kind support, and they do need your awareness about what are warning signs that would tell you to actually take the next step and try to get some professional help.
It's up to us. We can't wait for a they to do this spreading of the message that we can do something about it, that children, especially young children, have the most possibility for health and plasticity, for overcoming these early traumas if we as a community, a large community, support them.
We have permission now to meet children's needs. We have permission now from neuroscience to give children what they need, and to me that is so exciting.
If there was one place I would like to start with individuals as well as our society trying to make a difference, to really stop the cross-generational passage of trauma and of insecure attachment, it would be for parents to start a process of self-understanding. It basically costs nothing except the time and emotion that it takes for parents to begin on that process. And we all can do it. And the people who benefit most, besides ourselves, are our children.
We're spending literally 95% of our public dollars to change the brain, because that's what mental health is. That's what public education is. That's what juvenile justice intervention is. All of these are trying to change the brain. And we're spending almost nothing in the first 5 years of life when the brain is easiest to modify. And it takes the least amount of professional input, the least amount of insight. It takes just high quality caregiving.
It's us, not they. It's each one of us doing it now, not later, but now.